Welcome to the fifth module for human resource management. This fifth module deals with human resource planning and recruiting of personnel. What's the purpose of human resource planning? Well, it helps organizations meet business objectives, and when it's done well, helps the organization gain a competitive advantage. Human resource management planning fundamentally is a comparison of the present organization with the future goals of the organization. And it identifies what changes need to be made in order for the organization to meet its goals. It comes in three phases. The first phase is labor forecasting, second is goal setting and strategic planning, and third is program implementation and evaluation. The next few slides work through these three phases. This graphic, I think, gives a pretty good overview of the HR planning process. You can jump into this thing at any point because it's a cycle. Makes sense to start at the top, I think. We start with forecasts of labor demand and forecasts of labor supply. So a forecast of labor demand is an attempt to predict how much labor we're going to need, how many employees we're going to need, with what particular skills and what particular categories and at what particular time. Forecast of labor supply is a forecast first internally of what resources we have available, how many, in what category, with what knowledge and skills and abilities. We combine those two things together, demand and supply. The difference between them will be in each category either a surplus or a shortage. If demand exceeds supply, we've got a shortage. If supply exceeds demand, we have a surplus. So we take that information we have about our prediction about a future labor surplus or shortage. We use those data then to inform our goal setting and strategic planning. So goal setting for hiring, for training, for promotions, for other kind of personnel actions. Then from that goal setting, we implement programs to resolve that shortage or surplus one way or the other, and then evaluate the work we've done. So that's, again, this is kind of big picture, 30,000 feet overview of what this planning process looks like. Forecasting, recall, is an attempt to predict at some future point in time what the supply of labor will be and what the demand for labor will be in different categories, right? In different types of human resource categories. Knowing that you need 5 more full-time equivalent employees doesn't do you any good if you don't know if you need plumbers or if you need electricians or if you need laborers, right? So it's a prediction in the relevant categories in order to figure out whether there'll be a shortage or a surplus. So the way to go about this is first to forecast demand, figure out what sort of resources we're going to need in what categories at what time. Make a prediction then, a forecast about the supply, what internal resources will we have at that point in time and what categories, and start to take a look at the outside world as well, see if there's start to analyze what the external labor supply might look like, and then determine a labor surplus or shortage based on the demand forecast and the internal supply forecast, right? Because the surplus or shortage is what tells us whether we need to do something to decrease our labor force, or if we need to look outside in order to augment, in order to add to it. So forecasting labor demand involves looking at a few things. There's a few different ways of approaching it. There's not one of them that's right or correct. This is one of those situations where, at least for my money, it makes sense to look at all of them and see what information you're getting from all of them, and try and find a way to through some good economic analysis, a way to put them together in a way that gives you the best prediction of the future demand for labor that you'll see at the point in time that you're looking. So the first of these is trend analysis. Trend analysis is constructing and applying a statistical model or models that will predict labor demand for whatever the next period is, for the next year, the next quarter, whatever. And so this is usually a regression or a series of regressions that will attempt to statistically draw that line of best fit to smooth out the data over time, to make a statistical prediction for what sort of demand you will need at a point in time in the future. So it's a prediction. A second approach to labor forecasting is by looking at leading economic indicators. And so leading economic indicators are leading in that they predict the future. They're not leading, leading in this context doesn't mean they're the best or they're the most important or anything like that. Leading just means they're the economic indicators that predict the future. And so there's lots of these. You can just Google leading economic indicators and you'll see lots of them. Here are some of the ones that I think tend to be the most important across industries and across functions. The first one is simply stock market prices, right? Stock market prices are a prediction of the future. I purchase stock today because I think at some point in the future its value is going to be higher than what its value is today, right? So in that sense, if we assume that people who trade stocks are correct in their predictions, which they hardly ever are, but we got to choose something. If people are buying more than they're selling, prices are going up, and that's an indicator that the value of the underlying firms is going to be higher at some point in the future. Why would that be the case? Well, because those firms will be experiencing more economic activity in the future, right? They'll be bringing in more revenue. They'll be producing more profit. Another good example of a leading economic indicator, and one that's usually more helpful for small to medium-sized businesses, are housing starts. Housing starts are simply in new construction of homes. When the first permits are pulled for the construction of the home, right? So I should know what that first permit is. I'm guessing I think it's probably the plumbing or foundation, whatever that first permit is that the builder has to pull. That's a housing start. Why is that a leading economic indicator? Well, if I'm pouring a foundation, if I'm connecting to the city sewer system today, that means that over the next few months, I'm going to be doing electrical work, I'm going to be doing framing, I'm going to be doing bricklaying, I'm going to be doing drywall. In other words, the fact that I started today tells me that over the next few months, I'm going to be being engaged in economic activity. Leading economic, housing starts, I think, is particularly useful because housing starts we can disaggregate by zip code, right? We can look at the data for that first home building permit specific to zip codes, and so it tells us, the stock prices, the broader markets, the broader indices will tell us sort of at a national and maybe even global perspective what the future is going to be like. But housing starts, we can use that to focus in on a particular zip code or a particular area. Another possibility might be in industries that have metrics that are industry-wide for inventory levels, right? The fact that inventory levels across the industry high, that tells us that there's likely to be some selling happening in the future, right? Another is unemployment claims, right? A new unemployment claim, which is what are usually reported are new claims for unemployment. A new unemployment claim tells me that someone is likely to be unemployed for some period of time into the future. that tells me that the demand in the broader economy is going to be less if there are a higher number of new unemployment claims. Tells me that the labor demand in the short term is going to be higher if there is a lower number of new unemployment claims. Right? So that's the second one, are the leading economic indicators. The third one is simply, the work we do within the firm to break down silos between the world of human resource management and the operational areas within the firm. Talk to your sales manager, right? Ask the sales manager, hey, how's next quarter looking? Tell me the truth. Right? Talk to your production supervisors. Ask them, hey, what kind of what are you seeing for the next month, the next quarter? Are you seeing us working 2 shifts like we normally do? Are you seeing us going up to 3 shifts? Are you seeing us scale down to 1 shift? Are you seeing a lot of activity happening, right? And just like you might look at inventory levels across an industry, it's certainly even more valuable, or potentially more valuable, to look at your own inventory levels, right? Take a walk through the warehouse. Are there more pallets stacked up than there usually are? Ask your inventory people, what's going on? Do we have lots of product on hand? Do we have lots of raw materials on hand? Do we have lots of finished goods on hand? What does that tell us about the future, about the near-term future? So once we've done a forecast for labor demand, it's now time to make a prediction, make a forecast about labor supply. And typically the first step in forecasting labor supply is to look within the firm, look within your firm, and make a prediction about how many employees who are in their position currently will still be in their position in a quarter, in a year, in whatever cycle it is you're attempting to forecast. And so there is a particular method that we use for doing this. It's called a transitional matrix. And so a transitional matrix is a chart that lists job categories that individuals held in one period, and how many of them are still in that position in the next period. It'll also tell us, where did these people go? It'll tell us where did people currently in each of the job categories come from. And so if you take a look at the very next slide, it'll show you a real simple example of a transitional matrix, and I'll talk you through how one goes about reading it. So this is just a sample transitional matrix chart. And so here's how you go about reading it. So this particular one compares how individuals changed in our labor force from 2015 to 2018. So it looks at a 3-year period. And so if you look at the very first line, line 1 are sales managers. So of the individuals who were sales managers in my firm in 2015, when we get to 2018, 95% of them are still sales managers in my firm. 0 of them are now sales reps, 0 of them are now sales apprentices, 0 of them are assistant plant managers, 0 of them are production managers, 0 of them are production assemblers, 0 of them are clerical workers. 5% of them, if you'll see over there in column 8, 5% of them are now no longer in the organization. They got a better job, they retired, they got fired, whatever. And that's a different kind of analysis that we could do to figure out where they went outside of the organization. But for our purposes in forecasting supply, we're really not interested in where they went. We're just interested in the fact that they're not here, to contribute. So what does that tell me? So if that tells me that if the sales managers I had in place in 2015, 95% of them are still sales managers for me in 2018, that tells me that I'm likely for a future 3-year period, assuming that nothing drastic has changed. For a future 3-year period, I'm also going to be looking to replace about 5% of my sales managers. Now, I might need more sales managers because my operations gotten bigger, because whatever. But just in terms of maintaining what I have, I need to look outside for 5%. We'll just do a few more of these rows. The second row are sales reps. So of the sales representatives that I had in 2015, by the time we get to 2018, 5% of them are now sales managers. That's good. We had promotions. That's good. 60% of them are still sales reps. Okay, kept about 60% of the of our sales reps in place. 0 of them are now apprentices. That makes sense. 0 of them are now assistant plant managers. 0 of them are now production managers. 0% of them are now production assemblers. 0 of them are now clerical. 35% of them are no longer in the organization. Right? So what does that tell me? So that, in a 3-year period, I'm looking to replace about 40% of my sales reps, just to keep even, right? Because I've got to replace the 35% that are no longer in the organization, and I've got to replace the 5% that got promoted to sales managers. Is that turnover number good or bad? I don't know. It depends on the industry, depends on the firm's compensation strategy, depends on a lot of things. So how do you find out if that's good or bad? Well, benchmark against some other firms, benchmark against some other divisions within your firm, whatever. But that's not really relevant to what we're doing right now. What we're doing right now is we're just trying to figure out how many we're going to need. Skip down to another one. How about production assemblers? So that's row 6. 0% of them are now sales managers, 0% of them are now sales representatives, 0% of them are now sales apprentices, 0% of them are now, we're doing production assembly, 0% of them are now assistant plant managers, 10% of them are now production managers. That's good. We had some promotion there. 80% of them are still production assemblers. 10% of them have left the organization. All right. So that's how you read and use a transitional matrix. It doesn't tell us everything about how our labor force changed over this period of time. It only tells us who are in their current positions that were also in their current positions some period of time in the past. So 3 years. So in this case, a 3-year cycle. You could do a transitional matrix over a 1-year cycle, a 2-year cycle, 10-year cycle, whatever. 3-year cycle is a very common, very typical period of time to look at for a transitional matrix. We've now done a forecast of labor demand, and we've done a forecast of labor supply. You recall the next step along our chart is to forecast a surplus or a shortage. Forecasting demand and supply are the hard parts. Forecasting the surplus or shortage is very easy. So forecasting the surplus or shortage is, remember, for each of the relevant categories. So we're not just interested kind of in the abstract, what's the demand, what's the supply. So in each of the particular categories, if in a category demand is bigger than supply, that means I have a shortage. How big is the shortage? Demand minus supply. If the supply is bigger than the demand, that means I have a surplus. How big is the surplus? Supply minus demand equals surplus. That's it. Now back to our firm level analysis. So we've forecasted whether we're going to have a surplus or a shortage. Now we got to do something about that, right? We know that we predict that it's at the relevant point in the future we're going to have a surplus or a shortage. What are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to establish goals first to figure out whether our plans are successful, right? We're going to make, if we have a surplus, We're going to establish goals for how much of the workforce we're going to reduce. If we have a shortage, we're going to make goals for how much of the shortage we're going to fill. We're going to have in place when we need to have in place. And so obviously the goals come from the analysis of supply and demand. There are many strategies for dealing with surpluses and shortfalls. The next several slides go through many of the strategies, not all of them, but many of the strategies, and sort of highlight some of the considerations that one should take into account when one's thinking about one versus another. This first table looks at a variety of strategies that one might employ to reduce a surplus. And so one option for reducing a surplus is downsizing. Downsizing is doing layoffs, reduction in force, whatever you want to call it. It's taking people who currently work for you and telling them they're no longer going to work for you. How quickly can you see results from downsizing? Very fast. In the United States, virtually all of our employees are employees at will, meaning they have no expectation of continued employment. We can end the employment relationship at any time for any good reason or for no reason at all. A surplus supply of labor is definitely a good reason. It's a very valid business reason to let someone go. So you can do it very fast. You can announce a RIF today and have it be effective first thing tomorrow morning. So it's very fast. How much suffering does it cause? Well, for those folks that you lay off, it causes a whole lot of suffering, right? All of a sudden, I've gone from having a job to not having a job. All of a sudden, I've gone from being able to pay my rent and feed my family to not being able to pay my rent and feed my family, right? So it causes a lot of suffering on those who get laid off. It also causes some consternation among those who are left. If I'm working for a company that's doing layoffs, doing a reduction in force, there's a part of me that's saying, gosh, this might be a sinking ship. They're laying people off. I might be next. I'm also not happy that my friends got laid off and no longer have jobs. So it causes a good bit of suffering, both among those who are downsized and among those who are left. Another option for reducing a surplus is to not reduce the labor supply at all, but instead to reduce pay. How fast can you do that? Very fast. That same employment at will doctrine tells us if we can let somebody go at any time for a good reason or for no reason at all, we can cut their pay at any time for a good reason or no reason at all. And we can do it fast. We can announce it today to become effective tomorrow. So very fast. How much suffering does it cause? Well, if my boss came in and told me that my pay was going to be cut by 10%, 20%, I think I'm experiencing a high degree of suffering, right? But I'm not experiencing the same amount of suffering as if I had instead been laid off. Right, so pay reduction is kind of taking that suffering that those who get laid off would experience and sort of lessening it by spreading it among everybody. This has some dangers as well. My pay gets cut. I'm looking for a job. I love UTA, but if the president announces that faculty salaries are getting cut by 10%, I'm on the UTD website within minutes. I promise you, looking for a job. Another option, which is usually not a very good option, are demotions. Obviously, demotions, same logic, can do them fast. Announce it today, happen tomorrow. A demotion is demoralizing to anyone. And so, to take folks from, more senior positions and push them down into less senior positions, not because of their performance or because of their skill or knowledge or anything like that, but in response to a firm's financial exigency, is usually not a good plan. It usually doesn't make sense. I've been trying to think for the past few minutes here about whether there's ever a time that it makes sense. I can't think of one. I guess, in some particular industries there might be a time that it makes sense, but I just can't think of it. Transfers. So transfer could be a geographic transfer. Could be moving someone from your CVS here in Arlington to the CVS in Fort Worth, or the CVS in Waxahachie, or the CVS in Grand Prairie. So it could be a geographic transfer. It could also be a transfer from one type of work to a different type of work that the person would also be qualified for. Again, you can do those pretty fast, assuming that there isn't new training involved. The amount of suffering is, we say, is moderate, because nobody's losing their job, nobody's getting their pay cut, but it might mean, if it's a geographic transfer, it might mean that I have longer to drive to work. I'm not going to be thrilled about that, but I'm happy that I have a job, right? If it's a type of work transfer, might mean that I'm going from something that I enjoy more to something I enjoy less. Okay, but I'm still feeding my family. I'm still paying my rent, so kind of a moderate amount of suffering. Work sharing is another possibility. Work sharing is a way of rather than downsizing, instead identifying some employees whose basically hours get cut, so that two people who had two jobs in the past might share a particular job going forward. Again, something you can do pretty fast, assuming there's not new training or anything like that involved. Moderate amount of suffering. Usually you would only do this in the kind of situation where you have reason to believe that your employees are amenable to this anyway, or interested in this anyway. Maybe you have a couple employees who have been talking about retirement and talking about scaling back. Those might be folks who might be really excited about only having a part-time job rather than a full-time job. Maybe you have folks who've been talking about taking time off to spend with family, and so that they might be excited about being able to go from full-time to half-time. Another approach to reducing a surplus is a hiring freeze, or more commonly a hiring chill. A hiring freeze is simply the decision by the firm to stop hiring, stop your recruiting and employee selection processes, and not hire anyone. Most hiring freezes are not typically hard freezes. They're typically chills. It typically means that the firm will put up another procedural barrier before it decides to go look for new employees, before it posts jobs, and so that it's not that they won't be hiring anybody, which is what a freeze would be. A chill instead is just that we'll only hire into new positions if we absolutely have to, and if we have every reason to believe that we're going to have a need for that person going forward. Hiring freezes are slow because it doesn't the effect to the firm's labor expenses we don't see until time has passed, right? Until we would have hired someone and they would have started working and we would have started paying for it. But the amount of suffering caused is very low, right? Because none of my current employees are getting laid off. None of my current employees are losing salary. And so the amount of suffering is low. Natural attrition is basically the decision to just wait, because eventually people are going to start leaving, right? Eventually people are going to get better jobs elsewhere. People are going to move from the area. People are going to retire. People are going to do all the kind of things that lead them into category 8 from our transitional matrix to no longer being in the organization. And so natural attrition is let's just wait and let the workforce reduce itself. Could be slow, could be very, very slow, right? If you're a firm that has a very low turnover rate for whatever reason, because of something about your culture, something about your benefits, something about whatever, natural attrition can be very slow. I work for the government. I work for the university. Government employees are traditionally those that stick around forever, especially at universities, right? And so if there's a surplus at UTA of management faculty, and they're waiting for it to happen through natural attrition, depending upon the ages of the faculty, it's going to be very, very slow. But again, the amount of suffering caused is low. Another option are to create some incentives for early retirement, so that if you have a pension plan, and traditionally, if someone's formula of age and years would put them at a retirement pension of 70%, you say, hey, if you retire in the next 3 months, we'll do 75%. Or it's, hey, if you have the credits to retire and you want to do it in the next few months, we're going to give you a one-time severance package, a one-time exit bonus of X dollars or whatever, right? Speed of results, your textbook says slow. Early retirement incentives can be more moderate. They don't need to take forever. You can make them happen pretty quickly, and the amount of suffering caused is low, because even though I'm losing my job, I'm getting a nice cash payout. I don't have the stigma of being terminated involuntarily, the stigma of being laid off. I'm instead retiring, which is a sign of the end of a successful career. So amount of suffering caused is low. The last of the options here is retraining. In other words, taking a part of your labor force that's in the surplus area, training them to do work in a shortage area. Obviously, that's slow, depending upon the extent of retraining that's needed, right? Some retraining you can do in a couple weeks. Some retraining takes months or even years. Some retraining, requires someone to get certifications they don't have, or something like that. So retraining is slow, but the amount of suffering caused is low, right? We're not cutting anyone's pay. No one's losing their job. So you get the idea. So here, these are just a number of typical approaches to reducing a surplus that firms use. They all have their pluses and minuses. Each firm's culture and each firm's particular economic situation will sort of dictate, which direction they're more inclined to go to. But reducing a surplus is not fun work for HR. It's one of the least pleasant parts of the job. But it's part of the job, and so we need to be aware of it. Need to be ready to jump into it when it presents itself. Just like the previous slide were sort of some strategies for addressing a surplus, this slide identifies some strategies to consider for avoiding a shortfall. One strategy is the use of overtime. So if our employees typically work 40 hours a week, overtime is simply asking them to work 44 hours a week or 45 hours a week or whatever. The speed of results is fast. You can tell an employee, I need you to work overtime today, or probably first ask them, can you work overtime today? So it can be very fast. And the ability to change down the road is very high. Just because you tell an employee that they have the overtime possibility today doesn't mean that they're going to have the overtime possibility tomorrow, right? So you can get overtime today and then pull it back tomorrow or next week or whenever. Another option for avoiding a shortfall, the use of temporary employees. You can get temporary employees very fast, assuming that you don't need very particular skills, right? If you need the more particular skills you need, the longer it takes to get them in place. And the ability to change later is very high. Contracts for temporary employees are usually short-term in terms of particular assignments. They're usually requirements contracts, which means that my use of temporary employees is only what my requirements are, what my needs are. I don't need to bring them in if I don't have a need for them. A third option is outsourcing. So outsourcing, remember, is simply hiring another firm to do some of the work you were previously doing in-house. Maybe you previously had an army of administrative assistants producing documents and brochures and advertising materials, and so now you're gonna send it off to Kinko or FedEx Kinkos instead, right? Speed of results fast, usually, assuming that what you need isn't something very specific or something that requires new tooling at the outsourced location. Typically fast. Ability to change later is high, right? So assuming that the contract you make with your outsource provider is a short-term contract. Another approach to avoiding a shortfall are retrain transfers. So that basically taking someone in an area of the firm that doesn't have as significant a shortfall, retraining them to do a job that's in the area that does have the shortfall. This is slower because obviously retraining takes time. How slow it is depends on what kind of training is needed, right? More extensive technical training requires more time than less extensive or less technical training. Another strategy for avoiding a shortfall are turnover reductions. Turnover reductions could include things like retention bonuses, paying employees in a particular area one-time bonus to stay on for another month, another quarter, another whatever. Other types of turnover reductions might include sort of production-based increases in compensation. They might include additional benefits. They might include lots of different things. Basically, all those things that you would do to keep your employees who might otherwise leave you from leaving you. Right? Speed of results, well, in general, slow. However, if you have a particular employee or a couple particular employees who come to you and say, hey, the place down the road has offered me more money, I'm going to work for them, and you on the spot offer them some sort of retention incentive, and they decide not to, well, gosh, then your speed of results was fast, right? The ability to change later, here we say is moderate, just because once you start changing compensation levels and changing the expectations of employees, they tend to expect that down the road. And you can go back to your behaviorism notes from the OB class and see how conditioning would come into play there. Another approach to avoiding a shortfall is to hire more people, right? Speed of results, slow, takes a lot of time to post the job, a lot of time to select the employee, a lot of time to get them on board, a lot of time to do training, and the ability to change later is low. Once we hire someone for a regular permanent position, even though they have no legal expectation of continued employment, they certainly have a sort of, moral expectation of continued employment, assuming they're doing a reasonably good job, right? Last approach identified here to avoiding a shortfall is the possibility of technological innovation, and so by technological innovation, we're talking about automation, about finding a way to use machines and computers and other things to do some of the things that people were doing in the past. Speed of results, is slow if we're going to try to develop the technological innovation. The speed of results could be, more moderate to even fast if instead what we're doing is adopting a technological innovation that's out there that we just hadn't adopted yet, right? Ability to change later is low because typically, once you buy that piece of equipment, once you buy that robot, you're paying on it for years. It's right there in the factory, and so the ability to change later would mean releasing that sunk cost, right? And so the ability to change later would have a potential cost to it. So these are just some of the strategies for avoiding a shortfall. There's combinations of these things. There's others as well, but these are sort of the typical litany to think about, typical litany to consider. For whatever of the strategies that were selected, whether they were strategies for reducing a surplus or strategies for avoiding a shortfall, the final stage of the HR planning process involves implementing the strategies and then evaluating the outcomes. The organization must hold some individual accountable for achieving these goals, like any other particular objectives that the organization has. That person must also have the authority and the resources needed to accomplish those goals. It's important that this person issues regular progress reports so that the organization can be sure that all activities are occurring on schedule and that the results are starting to come in as expected. Implementation that ties planning and recruiting to the organization's strategy and to its efforts to develop employees becomes a complete program of talent management. In evaluating the results, the most obvious step is checking whether the organization has succeeded in avoiding the prospect of a shortage or the prospect of a surplus. Along with measuring this particular metric, the evaluation could and probably should also identify which parts of the interventions, which strategies seem to have the greatest contribution to the program's success or failure. A workforce utilization review is a particular type of internal labor supply analysis that is a comparison of the proportion of employees in protected groups with the proportion that each group represents in the relevant labor market. Recall in the United States, the protected groups are race minorities, religion minorities, national origin minorities, people over the age of 40, women, sexual minorities, both in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity, pregnant women, familial status, which would be like workers with children versus workers without children, the disabled, military veterans, and genetic information. And so those who have whose genetic information predisposes them to particular types of illnesses. This is a type of analysis that is certainly not required for all firms. It's required for government employers, required for government contractors, and required for some other types of employers as well. But it's certainly a good idea for all firms to consider doing this kind of analysis, right? It's an assessment of the current pattern of utilization and a forecast for how the utilization is likely to change or not change in the future. Particularly if there is an underutilization in the present and the forecast of an underutilization into the future, firms that are required to have these workforce utilization plans in place must establish particular numeric goals, quantitative goals, for particular dates in the future, and a plan for how it is that the firm is going to work to meet those goals. And so again, comparison of proportional employees in a protected group with the proportion that group represents in whatever the relevant labor market is, and then if it turns out particular groups are being underutilized, goals and a plan for how to fix that in the future. We transition now to the second of the two big topics for this module, and I promise this one is shorter than the first one. The second big topic is recruitment, so the recruiting of human resources. And so as we talk about it in the academic HRM literature, recruiting is any activity that the firm engages in that has the purpose of identifying and attracting potential employees to apply for jobs. Now remember I said in the real world there's another aspect to recruiting too. There's that additional aspect of recruiting of trying to get people who have to whom you've offered jobs to actually accept them and come work for you, right? But the way that the HRM literature looks at recruiting, recruiting is about building the pool of potential employees. And so it builds a potential supply for a future when the company will need that supply. It could be a short-term future or a long-term future. And there are three significant aspects, if you will, of recruiting that we'll spend some time looking at. The personnel policies of the firm, the various sources of recruiting employees, and then some particular traits and behaviors that recruiters that seem to serve recruiters well in doing the work of bringing prospective employees into the pool of the firm's prospective employees. The first of the three aspects of recruiting that seem worthy of our discussion are the personnel policies of the firm doing the hiring. An initial policy to first think about is the firm's approach to internal hiring and how it values internal recruiting versus external recruiting. There are, some firms, not many anymore, but there are some firms that have as kind of a centerpiece of their culture a policy that encourages promoting from within. One of the big package handling companies, I can't remember which one it was, at one point in their history had a requirement that every new employee to the firm, their first job was as a package handler. And they moved up from there. They don't have that anymore. Obviously, that doesn't really work in our contemporary economy. But there are still lots of places where the value of promoting from within is important to the firm. It's important to who they are to first consider for advancement those who are already working for the firm. It's a way of rewarding loyalty, if you will, a way of rewarding longevity. And so, to whatever extent that policy is relevant to your firm, don't violate it. It's a big deal, right? So the balance of or the consideration of internal versus external recruiting. Another critical personnel type policy that's important in the recruiting process is the firm's compensation plan. Your textbook speaks specifically to what are called lead the market pay strategies. Lead the market pay strategies are compensation plans that focus on paying the best in the relevant labor market, paying the most lucrative compensation packages. Why do you do that? Well, you do that if you want the best employees, if you want them to stick around for a while, if you want them to not be poached by other firms, and so these lead the market pay strategies are an important recruiting advantage because compensation is one of the most important job characteristics that most applicants look at, for better or worse. I'm not sure that's a good strategy, but for better or worse, it's one of the most important things that applicants look at. Another factor is sort of the presence of the firm in the community and its reputation broadly. The image of the organization impacts its attraction level. The fact that the firm is known as a leader in the industry, a leader in the community, makes it easier to recruit employees into positions. How does that come about? Well, that comes about with a firm that has specific goals and objectives that lead it to that place, right? That lead it to the place of having a strong social presence and strong social reputation. We've hinted around a little bit at this employment at will doctrine, and so let's take it on head on right now. So the employment at will doctrine governs the employment relationship of virtually all employers and employees in the United States. There's some exceptions, but virtually all employment relationships in the United States are governed by this employment at will doctrine. The employment at will doctrine is that either the employer or the employee can end the employment relationship at any time for any good reason or for no reason at all. So what's left out of that? Well, a bad reason. You can't terminate the employment relationship because you've decided you have too many women, or because you've decided that your employee is pregnant and you don't like people with families working for you. Those would be bad reasons. But the employment at will doctrine, simply stated, is that the employer or the employee can end the employment relationship at absolutely any time with no notice, for any good reason or for no reason at all. So that structure is sort of part of what the recruiter has to sell to prospective employees. The idea that they have no guarantee of a future job for any time at all, right? So how do you sell that? Well, you sell that by demonstrating data that show that the firm tends to retain people over time, and what those numbers show. The firm might have due process policies in place that state that even though we can fire anybody at any time for any good reason or for no reason at all, we have an appeal process. We have a due process approach so that the employee can appeal it, can try to stick around, or whatever. If it is the case, though, that the particular position is not an employment at will position, in other words, it's a contract position, either an individual contract between the employee and the employer, or a collective bargaining agreement between the union and the employer, that becomes a selling point, right? The fact that employment is guaranteed for some period of time, right? So who are the folks who you're most likely to come upon who have employment contracts? Well, obviously, in the Metroplex, are unions, which are mostly at the GM plant and at the airport with the pilots and flight attendants and baggage handlers and mechanics. Those union situations obviously have more protection than an employment at will arrangement. And as far as straight up employment contracts, the folks you'll be most likely to encounter are public school teachers. Public school teachers have, in Texas, have a contract of 1 academic year from, I think it's September 1st onward, so that during that 1 year, they can only be terminated for cause, for a good reason. They cannot be terminated for no reason at all. And that's just kind of for obvious reasons, right? We like the idea of my second grader having 1 teacher all through the school year, right? And so, plus, teachers are among those who aren't compensated the best, and so having that little bit of job security makes the positions a little bit more attractive. We're doing this recruiting inside the firm and outside the firm. It could be the case that you have employment policies in your firm that require you to recruit internally first, or require you to post internally some period of time before you post externally. But what does internal recruitment look like? Well, it almost always includes a job posting, right? And so a job posting is typically a job description, job specification, and then a description of the hiring process. And so it's a communication about the job vacancy to other employees in the organization, usually communicated through an employee intranet or an employee HRIS system that they log into frequently, or something like that. Advantages to internal recruitment: you're getting applicants who are well known to the organization already. They know about the firm. They know about the position, maybe. They tend to have more realistic expectations. And it's a cheap and fast internal recruitment source, right? We don't need to spend money on posting. When we're hiring someone internally, we can tend to move them faster because it's less important that they give notice if they're staying within the firm. And so there are definitely some advantages. There's also disadvantages, right? They know the firm well. That means they're coming into the new position with a set of expectations that may or may not hold true. they are not new blood, right? Which is one of the benefits you normally get when you hire someone from the outside, is that they're new blood. They have a new perspective, a new whatever. But so those are some internal recruitment sources. Obviously, in addition to the job postings, which are kind of the centerpiece of this, it's very appropriate and very desirable for hiring managers to discuss vacancies with other managers in the firm and ask them, hey, do you have anybody who would be a good fit for this, who this would be a good step up for? It's very appropriate for human resource professionals who sort of know career goals and career plans of particular employees to highlight to them when particular jobs open up, or are about to open up or become available. So those are some internal recruitment sources. For recruiting outside the firm, also a number of potential recruitment sources. We have direct applicants, so those folks who come to the firm and look for available positions and fill out an application for the firm and say, I want to do this. We have referrals from current employees, from vendors, from family members, from friends and all that kind of stuff, all those kind of referrals. There are job search and networking platforms. There's the big job search databases that are out there now. Firms seem to not like those, seem to not find those as valuable as they once did. And by the big ones, I'm talking about Monster, Career Builder, blah, blah, blah. Networking platforms like LinkedIn seem to be maintaining their value in the market. This continues to be a good source of connection between labor and the demand for labor. Public and private employment agencies, and so this, at the executive level, we're talking about headhunters. At the employee level, we're talking about temp to firm employment agencies. And for most firms, college recruiting is a big part of their external recruitment plan. I should note above, when I mentioned job search databases, even though recruiters are finding the big job search databases less useful, they continue to find the databases that colleges and universities host as very valuable, and that includes the Handshake database that we have here at UTA. And so whether you want to check it out for your own employment benefits, or check it out just to kind of see how it works from the perspective of a recruiter, there's a link here on this slide for you to check that out. This is a graphic from the textbook that attempts to sort of describe how the three aspects of recruiting relate to one another. I guess it's right. It sure seems right to me, but I'm also not entirely sure how putting them in this format with the arrows makes it more useful than just knowledge of the three aspects of recruiting standing on their own. So you can disagree with me, and maybe the arrows just made the difference for you, and now you understand everything. But this particular format doesn't do anything for me. It might for you though. But we'll take a look at the three aspects on the next few slides. What makes an external recruitment source a good source? How do we go about evaluating the quality of our different sources? Well, we want to look at two primary things. We want to look at how many viable candidates are produced, how many applicants from the source do we actually hire, and then secondly, how much did it cost us to get there? And so on the first piece, we're talking about the yield ratio, or yield ration. The yield ratio is the percentage of applicants who move from one stage of recruitment and selection process to the next. So if my first stage of the recruitment and selection process is submit an application and resume, and the second step is phone screening with HR person, The percent who move from the first to the second is the yield. If my second step is that that screening call with someone in HR, and the third step is an initial interview with the hiring manager, maybe. The yield is what percentage of those who are in phase 2 moved on to phase 3. And so what do? Well, you look at your various sources, look at your yield ratios from step to step to step, and you can see visually, and you usually don't have to do the math. Usually you can see visually where you're getting, which sources are the most valuable, which candidates are getting further and further into the selection process. Candidates getting further and further into the selection process is a sign that that's a quality recruitment source for you, right? And then ultimately, how many you hire from each of the sources is probably the ultimate ratio to look at. Another way to evaluate the quality of recruitment sources is to look at the cost per hire. And so that's the total amount spent to fill a vacancy. And so it's the amount spent using the particular recruitment source by amount of hires from the source. A lower cost per hire indicates an efficient recruitment source, but only if it yields a candidate who is effective in the role that we've hired him or her for, and they have some longevity with the firm, right? So just because the cost per hire is low, that doesn't necessarily make it a high quality recruitment source if it led us to hiring someone who was, not as qualified as they seemed, or who didn't work out culturally for whatever reason, or didn't fit within the firm's expectations. So those are the two things we look at. We look at yield ratios and cost per hire. Who does recruiting in firms? Typically, there is within the HRM department, the human resource department or personnel department, a recruiting function. And so if it's a small to medium sized firm, there might be a recruiter or a couple recruiters who report to the HR director. If it's more of a medium to large size firm, there'll be a recruiting department. And so there'll be a director of recruiting, and then a number of recruiting specialists, human resource specialists, recruiting specialists, who do that work. By the way, you see this this title specialist is a very typical first title for someone in one of the functional areas of human resources. And so if your plan is to go into HR, your very first job could very well be recruiting specialist, training specialist, compensation specialist. You get the idea. Specialist within each of the functional areas. Applicants tend to view recruiters who have positive attitudes, who are smiley and warm, more positively. Recruiting is a sales position, right? And so think about those people that make good salespeople. Those are the people that make good recruiters. And so, in addition, recruiters who provide realistic job expectations, share with candidates both the positives and negatives, tend to be the most effective recruiters. Ultimately, recruiter characteristics like personality and all that kind of stuff is less important than the firm's hiring policies, compensation policies, development policies that underlie the recruiting activity. But we shouldn't discount the role of a good recruiter. Good recruiters have good connections at colleges and universities, good connections with placement agencies and whatnot, so that they really add significant value as a part of the firm's knowledge force, right? As a knowledge worker in the firm, they're able to rely on those relationships to connect particular job seekers or potential job seekers with the firm's needs. How can recruiters enhance their impact? Well, providing timely feedback to applicants is very important. When folks are in that employment-seeking part of their life, they're experiencing a lot of anxiety. they want to move fast. They've got applications in different places. They want to know where they stand in one search versus another search, and so being able to communicate as timely as possible and as liberally as your firm's policies allow about what's going on in the process is very helpful to candidates. Just as important as providing information about where a candidate is in the search and how long it's going to take and that kind of stuff, I think the role of recruiters in giving applicants a sign that it's not going to happen is equally important, and maybe more important. I think it's part of the moral responsibility or social responsibility of firms who are hiring from the outside, that once they know they're not going to go with a candidate, to let that candidate know as quickly and frankly as possible, so that candidate can get on with their life, can get on with their job search, and can get more serious about other firms where it might happen. It's a tough thing to do. Recruiters don't like to do it, right? Recruiters are salespeople, so they want to focus on the positive and focus on things moving forward. But particularly when the firm decides at very early stages in the selection process that a particular candidate isn't going to advance, the hiring manager isn't interested in calling, people who just submitted a resume who they never met. That's the work of HRM professionals. That's the work of recruiters. And so it is a critical part of the recruiter job. I think recruiters will also tell you that they've found that it helps sort of manage their call volume, their email volume, by proactively doing that, because then they have fewer prompts from candidates. Hey, where are we? Hey, where do we stand? Hey, what's going on? But still, those it isn't going to happen calls, those are tough calls to make. Your textbook includes this section about basically recruiter horror stories or bad experiences with recruiters. I don't know if it adds value. I guess it's kind of interesting, kind of funny to read about, and yeah, I guess they do provide examples of behaviors to avoid. But if you didn't know to avoid these behaviors in the first place, you've probably got bigger problems.